Hi everyone, it's Nicole here today with my January 2015 Paper Doll Art Journaling page. I'm continuing this series that I did last year, with the only exception being that I'm not going to be stamping Simon the dog on all of my pages. I'm going to be incorporating different stamped embellishments, but I'm still going to be using the leftover Simon Says Stamp card kit components for my 6x8 art journaling pages. To start my January page, I am stamping the Aurora Julie Nutting stamp here. I'm going to stamp the dress portion on this 6x6 piece of Bo Bunny paper from the January 2015 Simon Says Stamp card kit. I loved the color of this purple 6x6 paper and then the snowflake design on it. I kind of thought it almost looked like a princess gown or something. And so she's going to be kind of a wintry type princess. While I have her inked up, I'm going to stamp her on a scrap of text paper. This is a scrap of 12 by 12 text paper. It's scrapbook paper, so it's going to be a little thicker weight than maybe a book type paper. I have never used a book type paper, so I'm not sure if that would, how that would hold up. It's going to be quite a bit thinner. I like the scrapbook weight paper simply because it gives a little bit more of a substantial feeling to the paper dolls. I cut out her dress. I wanted to see how that would look. And then I'm going to add some depth and dimension to her dress with Copic markers. I'm using some blue violet markers here. Part of the reason I like adding the shading, but I am really going to add a ton onto this particular dress because it's going to be one layer. I'm not paper piecing a ton of layers to this dress. I only had that 6x6 piece in this color, and I wanted to stick to keeping her dress all in this one color. I contemplated layering on some vellum and things, and it just took away from the color of the dress, and I really liked it. And I wanted it to be that really kind of elegant purple snowflake looking gown. So I did my darkest color, and then I went over it with a little bit lighter blue violet, and then I went in with a cool gray 00 and really blended it out to get rid of some of those harsh lines. And you can see it starting to really kind of take shape. Then I went in with my mid-tone and my cool gray and added even more shading. And then even with my darkest color, I end up going back in a little bit and adding more depth and dimension. The more you add, the better the dress looks. And it really, really helps bring the dress alive. You can see so much more detail by adding a little bit of that Copic marker shading. There's what her dress looks like. I'm going to go ahead and color in her skin. There's not a ton of skin showing on this stamp, so it's pretty quick, or on this stamped image, it's really quick to color. I'm using E00, E11, E13, and R20. Only a tiny bit of that E13, and then I will blend everything back out with the E00. Now for her hair, I wanted to give her black hair. When you're Copic coloring black hair, you don't actually use your black marker. You build up to that dark hair with your gray markers. I'm using cool gray because that's what I had out already for other things on my art journal page. I did my lightest color, then I kind of went in and added where my dark highlights were going to be, and then went back with my mid-tone color to finish out her hair. And I love how the whole doll is coming together now. Now there's just a peek of her gloves showing there, so I'm going to add some paper piecing gloves for that. Before I do, I'm going to go over her entire dress with the Wink of Stella clear glitter brush marker to give it that really fun iridescent look, and I think it just makes it very elegant. I'm going to set that aside to dry while I stamp her gloves on this other scrap of Bo Bunny paper from the January 2015 Simon Says Stamp card kit. And I don't want to take away from the kind of ivory color of these gloves, so I'm using some cool gray markers to add just a tiny touch of shading and things, and then I'll cut both of those out. There's only a peek of that right one showing and quite a bit more of the left one. Get those cut out, and then I can glue all of these elements onto my page. So before I do that, I am going to go ahead and add a little bit additional detailing to the dress. I wanted to really highlight those white specks on her dress to make it look like she's standing in snow. Those white specks were already there. I just wanted to draw attention to them. Now I can add all of the paper pieced elements to my doll, and I'm doing this with a Zig glue pen. I like to adhere my paper piecing to the doll before I actually cut her out. I find it really adds to the stability of the doll. I stamped her crown on a scrap of Basil metallic silver cardstock from the December 2015 Simon Says Stamp card kit, and then I added acrylic blocks to the design to hold everything down while the glue dried. I am using a craft knife to cut out in between her arm and her body there, and then simply cutting out the rest of my doll with scissors. And then I'm going to take the Wink of Stella clear glitter pen to her crown and color that in, give it a little bit of glitter, and then I'm taking glossy accents and covering that crown with the glossy accents, and I can set her aside to dry while I work on the background. And the background this time is going to be a little bit different than I've done it in the past. I'm going to piece together some of those other 6x6 pattern papers from the Simon Says Stamp card kit to create my background. And I'm die cutting this white piece that I used for the gloves, and I'd already previously used it for my cards from the January card kit. And I used the Lawn Fawn Stitched Hillside Borders dies. I'm going to create some snow there, and I'm trying to figure out the best combination of papers to use to create my background, because the 6x6 paper is obviously not going to be big enough. I ended up die cutting another piece of cream paper I just had in my scrap file to create another snowdrift behind her to kind of cover up the fact that that wood grain paper doesn't go all the way down the page. I'll adhere all of those elements to a 6x8 sheet of white cardstock. Now I stamped a bunch of critters here. They're all from different stamp sets. The fox is Avery Elle, the bunny is Lawn Fawn, and the kitty cat is Mama Elephant, but I liked the size of the critters. And as I had laid out the design, I really felt like she needed some little critters or something to add to the design of the page. I stamped Live Creatively on the wood grain background and with Versamark ink and heat embossed it with white embossing powder. This is a stamp, it's an old stamp from Studio Calico that I had in my stash, but I liked the sentiment behind it. Go ahead and adhere all of the elements, the snowdrifts, the wood grain paper, and the doll to my 6x8 page. Now these jewels are coming soon from Prima. They are the Say It With Crystals Julie Nutting crystal or gemstone stamps, and you can dress up your dolls with them. I think they're fantastic, and I know Simon Says Stamp will be getting those in stock soon. I'll color in the fox here with some Copic markers. I like to stamp my critters just like last year on the text paper. I think it adds to the element of the page. Because the doll is on text paper, I feel like anything that critter-wise that I stamp needs to also be paper pieced in some sort of fashion instead of stamping them on traditional white solid paper. It kind of adds to the artsy feel of the page, I think. And I did start coloring. I colored that bunny too dark. I didn't want the bunny to look gray. Because I started on cream paper, I kind of misjudged how it was going to end up. So I ended up stamping another bunny and coloring it in with lighter cool gray markers. And I also tried something else with the cat, and I didn't like the polka dots with the text paper. So I went with a gray kitty, and then for the bunny, I'm going to try to keep the cool grays to a minimum so it retains that white feel, even though it's not exactly white paper. I'm going to leave some little white paws and a tip of a tail for the kitty cat. I think little white and gray kitties are fun. I had a little white and gray kitty when I was little. I'll go ahead and I'm going to fussy cut all these. Now all of these critters have coordinating dies, But for my art journal pages, I really do a lot of fussy cutting. I don't want that white border left around any of my stamped pieces. I think it would take away from the rest of the design since the doll and everything don't have that same white border. Here's that other bunny. I'm going to just very, very lightly go in with my cool gray markers. I'm using C00, C2, and then R20 for the little pink cheek. A little C3 to add even darker dimension, but that's it. Hardly any coloring on this one. And it ended up, I think it turned out looking like I wanted it to. I definitely didn't want it to appear to be too gray. Once I have all of my critters fussy cut, I can glue them in place right there on the left side of the page. And I love how they're all kind of looking up, like they're almost looking at her. Just a fun little way to dress up the design, I think. Again, I'm using my acrylic block to hold those down while the glue dries, and I'm using my cool gray markers to add some shading so it appears they're sitting there in the snow. I started with my cool gray marker, and it's so light, it mostly just kind of wets the paper enough so that when I go in with my C2, it doesn't leave too harsh of a line. So cool gray first, and then I'm doing the C2, and then I go back over it just a little bit if I need to. I'm using my black Sakura marker to add definition to the nose and the eyes on the critters. It just helps add that additional detail and really makes their eyes pop. I'm using some teeny tiny small clear gemstones in the center of the snowflakes on the background of the page. Give additional sparkle to the background. And finally, I'm taking a date stamp and stamping the date underneath. That's one thing I didn't do last year that I wish I would have, so that I know what month I did each of my pages. I hope you've enjoyed my January 2015 Paper Doll Art Journaling page. The supplies I've used are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.